Let's get into it. Soul Not For Sale podcast. Today we got Joe Rogan talking about a different type of mystic than who I've been covering, Alan Watts and Terrence McKenna. Today we are talking about Lenny Bruce. So Joe's going to be having that conversation. Then after that, I'm going to show you a little bit about Lenny Bruce and how he molded comedy and how ahead of his time that he was. And the fact that he died so we could have more freedom of speech on stage and eventually, without him knowing, online. And then I'm going to show you a little bit about Alan Watts talking about freedom and necessity, which goes right along with what Lenny Bruce was all about. Let's get into it.
Yeah. Well, it's great. I'm looking forward to performing there, so it's sweet.
You're going to have a good time, man.
Great.
Did you bring people to open with you, or you got local people?
I think we got local. I'm not 100% sure, but I didn't bring people with me. But
we have a lot of good local people.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you could bring somebody, or you're in a community where there's great comedy.
Yeah.
So I'd much rather do that.
Yeah, you'll have a great hang. The green room is really great.
Okay.
It's a great hang. We have Mae West couch in there.
Okay.
That Peter Shore gave me. It's Mitzi's. She had it in her house, and so we had it reupholstered.
Oh,
so
hilarious.
in the green room, this beautiful pink couch. That's Mae West couch.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah. So the bones of it are Mae West couch.
That's great.
Yeah, and so we have Rodney Dangerfield's handwritten notes on the wall from his last Tonight Show special. So it's all the different bits that he wanted to hit and all the different things that he wanted to talk about. And then Patrick Bet-David gave me one of Lenny Bruce's microphones.
Holy.
We have Lenny Bruce's microphone framed on the wall above the monitors.
I feel like Lenny Bruce, not enough comics understand the road he paved for everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's known that he did that, but
he's the OG.
He was the OG.
He's the OG.
That's what I'm trying to say.
He was the first guy to go to jail. He was going to jail
arrested him
a bunch of times.
That is insane.
For stuff that
words
is nothing. Today, it wouldn't even get you kicked off TikTok.
But we still had the First Amendment at that time, so that's what's so interesting to me.
Yeah.
The interpretation of, or the enforcement of, that's wild.
Well, this is the role.
Same Constitution.
Yeah, same Constitution. Well, this is the role that comedy plays in free speech, because we are really one of the only countries that has the kind of free speech that we have. The Declaration, when we have the First Amendment, it talks very specifically, the very first one, about our ability to express ourselves, how important that is.
Yep.
But if you're a comedian and you can't do that, like if someone's deciding what you get, well, that sets the boundaries for everything else. If he didn't do that, if he wasn't doing that in the 50s and the 60s and getting arrested, like who knows where free speech would be today?
What was he arrested on?
Profanity.
You could be arrested on profanity?
Yeah, he was arrested on profanity charges. Yeah, they had profanity laws back then, where in public places you couldn't have, in different places in different districts had different regulations, but where I'm sure in San Francisco where he started, he probably could do whatever he wanted. And then, as you travel and you start, and then he became more and more popular.
Obscenity.
This reminds me of
profanity, obscenity. So here it is. He was arrested at the Jazz Workshop in San Francisco, which is even crazier in 1961, where he used the word sucker and said that to is a preposition, is a verb, that the sexual context of was so common that it bore no weight, and that if someone hearing it became upset, he probably can't come. Although the jury acquitted him, other law enforcement agencies began monitoring his appearances, resulting in frequent arrests under obscenity charges.
Yeah, but Joe, see although a jury acquitted him, I'm just wondering, like, was he actually breaking a law, or were they just hassling him by arresting him? Because he can't...
Dude, they arrested him for saying schmuck.
I mean...
Go back to that real quick.
But I'm saying... There's no what do you charge somebody with?
Well, this was the obscenity charges. Like they said, if you go back to that Wikipedia page, look at that. This is crazy. He said Sherman Block later became the county sheriff. The charge this time was that the comedian had used the word schmuck, an insulting Yiddish word that was also considered a term for penis.
Oh my gosh.
The Hollywood charges were later dismissed.
Right.
So this was in Philadelphia, and then Los Angeles, and then West Hollywood. In West Hollywood, he was arrested. Imagine, the place where the Comedy Store resides right now. He was arrested just 10 years before Richard Pryor was performing live in the Sunset Strip.
I mean, what about the
one in Philly is legit.
The gay...
What's that, Jamie?
Drug possession.
Yeah, he did a lot of drugs.
Yeah, well,
that's a fact.
I would do a lot of drugs if I got arrested every time I said schmuck.
So live in the Sunset Strip, I think, was 81 or 82. Is that correct? What year was live in the Sunset Strip? Because I was in high school. I remember that. 66. I have that poster, that Lenny Bruce poster.
There's a lot of Lenny Bruce love out
Yeah.
which is so cool.
Yeah, I have a lot of Lenny Bruce stuff out there. Look, he was the guy. And it's hard when you listen to his stuff today because most of it, it's kind of trite. Like we've heard all the premises before. It's because he broke the ground. You have to remember, people were so innocent in 1961. The culture was so different that what he was saying was groundbreaking.
I fell into that trap. I was like, I'm not really digging it. I'm not enjoying it. But it's like you have to really think about where we were then.
Sure, if you listen to Shakespeare talk, you're probably like, this guy's a real what thou dost not, like, shut up. But if it's like in the context of 1961, what he was doing was, it was akin to a lot of things that were to come, like the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement. All these things were bubbling up about this freedom of exploring ideas and expressing yourself. But in comedy, it had just been two Jews walking to a bar. It had been jokes, set up punchline. The Italian says to the Polish guy. It would have been a lot of that stuff. And so he came along and was like, why do we have these words that are forbidden? Why do we have this? Why is that? Why can't people be in love this way? Why can't that happen? And it was like, people were like, Jesus, like, why can't we? And like, he changed the way people thought about life, not just about comedy. And then I think Richard Pryor came along and made it way better. Yeah,
made it funnier. But also what fascinates me so much about that with Lenny Bruce is it's the same First Amendment that we have right today. It's the same.
Yeah.
And those words have not changed, but society has, or its interpretation has, or its enforcement has. That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild.
The enforcement is the thing. And then the concept of obscenity charges. Obscenity charges are very subjective, right? Who's to decide what's obscene? To me, schmuck is not obscene. It's kind of cute. If someone calls you a schmuck, it's probably a friend of yours. You know, like, you schmuck, like, it's not I mean, you get arrested for schmuck? That's crazy. What is this, Jamie?
This is where the obscenity law came from, a court case.
Well, this is 73, though.
This is what I typed in word of the obscenity laws in San Francisco.
No, I understand, but this is 73 because, he was 61. So what does it say there? The ruling? Scroll up at the top a little bit. It says a landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court clarifying the legal definition of obscenity as material that lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value.
Jeez.
The ruling was the origin of three-part judicial test for determining obscene media content that could be banned by government authorities, which is now known as the Miller test. So here's the thing to think about this.
Miller test is actually quite relevant right now. It's coming up a lot.
Oh, is it?
Miller test, yes.
For what?
First Amendment stuff. I just heard something about it. That's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting because the thing about this is probably all in response to all the anti-war activists and all of the whole hippie freedom of speech, flower child movement.
I did a piece for the Daily Show after Biden won, and this woman in New Jersey had up 10, 15 flags, Joe Biden flags. Was on a path to a school, and a lot of parents said, "Take down the flag." She said, "It's my First Amendment right." Got all messy. The city made her take it down. She refused. NAACP popped in to defend her, saying it was her right as Biden was a political figure, but then it became an obscenity. It was a very interesting piece, and I spoke to her, and she was very outspoken. And my whole take was like, "Hey, just." Maybe let's say legally you can put those flags up, but it's just kind of right? And she was like, yeah, I'm gonna put my flags up. But interesting when obscenity mixes in with school, kid. What is that now?
Right. Right. Especially
public figure. If it says fuck Tony, Michael, that's different than Joe Biden, the sitting president of the United States.
Right.
All fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's also, it's like, what do you want to see in your neighborhood? Like, do you really, I don't like people putting those stupid signs on their lawns. My parents were diehard liberals. Okay. They were living in Florida at the time, and this is during 2016. And my mom was complaining, every time I put my Hillary Clinton sign, someone takes it down. I'm like, you're in Florida. Like, why are you putting Hillary Clinton signs on your lawn? Yeah. But to my mom, it might as well be like she was supporting the Miami Dolphins. Yeah. That was her team. Her team was the Democrats.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I don't like.
Very, very interesting stuff. And one thing that this guy said that was very interesting, boring guest altogether, just aficionado here. I'm just an aficionado here. Pretty boring guest, but, Daily Show, kind of, on brand. He's not going to go into the weeds on any, one topic, but he does say this very, very interesting thing about what happened with Lenny Bruce. Same First Amendment, same Constitution. And they were doing this type of stuff to him. I guess it kind of shows that at all times, since the Constitution was made, and I shouldn't say it all times, but it's another example of politicians trying to work their way around the Constitution. It happens all too often. It's still happening today quite a bit. And I guess at that time it kind of worked because of the way society was. Now society's getting to a point where they're just like, give me back my N-word. Society's like, give it back. I wasn't misusing it. Okay? There's a whole bunch of... Listen, back in the day, there weren't as many songs with the N-word. I'm trying to get my N-word back. I have much use for that word. We're getting to a point where, I'm saying, where's my F word, man? I want my 3-letter F word back. I want them all back. Where's my R word? There's so many R words right now. I need my R word back. And I get it. I get it, but we're at a point right now where things are starting to shift, and society is starting to lean towards being like, okay, that needs to happen. We're looking for platforms where that's okay. We're looking for places where that's okay. We're looking for comedy clubs where people are doing that type of stuff. Like I know some underground places in regards to comedy where it's like not a lot of people go, but a lot of people go religiously because you can say whatever you want. And the comics are going to say whatever they want. Doesn't matter what topic it is, anything. It's like it's the early 90s all over again. But even then, there were limitations, So let's get into Lenny Bruce a little bit. I want to show you one thing about him. So ahead of his time with this. And if you've seen it before, please forgive me, but I have to play it. Here he is talking about fake news. He's not calling it fake news, but that's what he's talking about. It's about believing what you read in the newspapers.
I've been thinking, about the first part of the show where I call myself a liar. Actually, that's it's all tricks and devices that are used. That's what entertainment is devised, trick theories. But that's an interesting theory too. Then by that I'm saying that the biggest comedians are liars. Well, that's not so. I got you an example here. These are papers. Let's see what's today here. This is June the 19th. This is 1957. But I really love them, and I've always said them, because they show how newspapers, use sensationalism, which is a lie and an entertainment medium to swing and prove a point. This is concerning the Melchior robbery. Now, these are actually legit newspapers. This was the morning, and this is all LA, Los Angeles. 4 gunmen barred and robbed Melchior of $100,000. Now, later on that day, in the Examiner, Lawrence Melchior, $125,000 holdup. Ready? This is all on the same day. The Citizen News, Melchior robbers get $139,771. Right? 3 gunmen robbed and bind Melchior of $250,000. Ready? It's nice. You can really believe what you read in the newspapers. Okay. Now, later on that day, the next day, the Melchior robbery was solved, and they got back the $90,000. The New York Times didn't even confirm there was a guy such as Melchior. Which is really again.
Very, very interesting stuff, the fact that he was already cluing into that and felt like people needed to know that type of thing and wanted to bring it to the stage, because that's not all that funny. It is as he's going through it and you're seeing the changes, but it's not the regular setup, punchline. In fact, he has newspapers and he's showing you newspapers, but what he's really doing more than anything, he's trying to make you think. The same way, YouTubers, people on Rumble, etc., they're trying to make you think right now. They want you to think about what's going on, think about what you're seeing. Some of them are trying to bring you the news. Some of them are doing a combination, which I try to do sometimes. It's just amazing to think about. You know, he's like, this is 1957. I think he said 1957 when he had these newspapers, right? So he's been doing this since he got his, you know, acclaim to fame kind of thing. I think around 51. So this is even before Alan Watts was making his appearances and lectures and everything. So this guy was really by himself in a lot of ways. He was by himself in comedy, and he's by himself in the world because the things he was doing were getting him arrested time and time again. Here, I have another clip of him. This is just like some blah, blah, blah. That's what it's called, literally. Let's listen to this.
The bust. What I got arrested for in San Francisco. San Francisco, I got arrested for, what I think, we can hear that, Daddy. I'm not going to repeat the word because I want to finish the gig here tonight. It's, they said it was vernacular for a favorite homosexual practice, a 10-letter word. It's really chic. That's 2 4-letter words and a preposition. I wish I could tell you the word. It starts with a C. Well, you know what the word is. Now, it's weird how they manifested that word as homosexual, because I don't. That relates to any contemporary chick I know, or would know, or would love, or would marry, you know. And now, when I took the bust, I finished the show. I said that word, you know, the 10-letter word, and he comes over and says, Lenny, my name is Sergeant blah, blah. You know the word you said? I said a lot of words that time. Well, that word. Oh, yeah. Well, Lenny, that's against the law. I'm going to take it down. Okay, that's cool. Oh, gotta say. It's against the law to say it and to do it. Well, I didn't do it, man. I know, but I just had to tell you that all the time. Okay. All right. Now, we're getting in the way again. And the one he is cool, because he said you broke the law and specifically this thing. Now, the other guy, look, I got a wife and kid. I don't want to hear that crap at all, man. I don't want to get involved emotionally with this. What do you mean you want to hear that crap? Did your wife ever do that to you? Bam, then it got very sticky. No. You ever say the word no? Never said, honest to God, never said the word never. How long you married? 18 years. You ever chip it on your wife? Never. Never one time in 18 years you chip it down your lady, never one time. Then I love you. Because you're a spiritual guy, but if you're lying, you'll spend some dead time in purgatory. Now, we really got into it. Okay, now, get in the court, take the same bus. The judge, Aaron Avramitz, a red-headed junkyard Jew, a real verbissiner with thick fingers and a homemade glass eye. Tougho, right? He comes in, blah, blah, swear the heat in. What do he say? Your Honor, he said blah, blah, blah. The judge, he said blah, blah, blah. Then the guy really yanked it up. That's right. I hadn't believe it. There was a guy up on the stage in front of women in a mixed audience saying blah, blah, blah. The judge, well, this I never heard, blah, blah, blah. Said blah, blah, blah. He said blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to lie to you. It's in the minutes. I'm not going to lie to you. All right. The DA. The guy said blah, blah, blah. Look at him. He's smug. He's not going to repent. Then I dug something. They sort of like saying blah, blah, blah.
And now this blah, blah, blah that he's talking about is the exact word that Joe Rogan said, which I had to bleep out because of where I'm at right now. And the blah, blah, blah and the 10-letter word, that's 2 4-letter words and a prefix. Oh, we're still there. We're still there in different ways, man. You know, for Lenny, they took away that freedom to say those things and they would lock him up. But he could still say them. He could still get the point across and then sell out another show and, you know, maybe not say it just like he chose to right then, just so he could get through the show and not get arrested because the police were literally standing right there listening to him just in case he said anything, you know. But to us now, they just link that to, they're like, there's no locking up because they know they can't do that because society has adjusted, but they just link it to finance, you know? And that's why with me, I want to do comedy so bad. I want to just do comedy. I will always do this show, but I want my main FU money to come from comedy so I can say what I want on that stage. Because believe you me, I open up to you guys a lot, but you aren't hearing half of what I want to say. Nah. Maybe a third in a bit, you know? Maybe a third in a bit. It's interesting the way that it works now. We're very used to it, just like he was used to it. You know what Lenny Bruce was, when you think about it, he was shadow banned. I know all about that. Not personally, of course not, because they would never do that to me. They would They would never do that to me, but I've heard about it, I've heard things. And that's what it sounds like with him. That's what it sounds like he's going through. They're there watching him. As soon as he says the thing, that's it. You're going. He goes to jail. And there he made it really funny. But eventually it didn't get funny to him anymore. And eventually he couldn't convey it in a way that had humor to it. And it got to the point, because the charges were upping and the fines and this and that, it got to the point where he was just reading the depositions. He would just read what they were saying. And it became, again, this is why I liken him to someone like Alan Watts, because he didn't care for them to laugh anymore. He just wanted them to understand that he's saying these words, he's doing these things, and now they're putting him through this process. And it wasn't fair. But there was a reason they were doing it, I found in my research. After I play this, I'll get to the Alan Watts stuff where he talks about freedom and necessity. Because was this freedom or was this necessity? Everything we saw with Lenny Bruce, everything you just heard. Was it freedom or was it necessity? Because we needed someone to do this. And he was free to do it or to not do it. But we'll talk about that after. But yeah, this is very weird. I learned this.
He allowed Lenny to use him, and the doctor would write scripts.
Lenny had prescriptions for his drugs, but that didn't seem to matter in the city of brotherly love. He was approached by a bail bondsman named Levy, who told Lenny if he paid off a judge named Kaiser, the drug charges would be dropped. Lenny refused, and instead went to the press.
Lenny, did you say you were offered to buy your way out of this?
Very succinctly, Gary Levy, a Nardone, a bail bondsman who was a supposedly intermediary, and he said to me, Mr. Levy, who is the epitome of every Otto Kruger corruption that relates to the city, I know Magistrate Kaiser, and I can talk to him. We can cool the whole thing out for $10,000. Cool what out for $10,000? Well, I can talk. It's got to go to Lieutenant Bondi. We got to give him $500. Then we got to give the druggist $300. And the doctor, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to Magistrate Kaiser's house down. Hey, Magistrate, with a nightcap, here's $50. Catch. No, man, I'm not going to involve myself with that. Now it went to a bargaining scene. Well, maybe we can try $5,000. He owes me a lot of favors. I want to this, Then to $3,000, then to $2,500. Now I said, nada.
What's the purpose of these drugs that you did get, Lenny?
I don't know. I'm not a qualified physician, and that's where they really hung me up, And in court, he says, you got to get these drugs, and the patient insisted on them. I said, the patient insisted on them, and then I want pablum, and not only that, I want to kiss his wife and hug his grandma and cut his nose over the shearing scissor. That's also the patient insisted on.
And you've been strictly railroaded on this whole thing.
That's a good... I know. Well, the railroad, they really had it. I hate to bug them.
The charge in Philadelphia couldn't hold up in court, but the damage had been done. Lenny had exposed the bride, and he had named names. Lenny Bruce was now a marked man.
The police have a mutuality of interest, and if the guy gets off, it starts to circulate. Hey, listen, this bastard beat the case here. He beat the case either because he got a smart lawyer, because this witness lied. You get him up there.
Just 5 days after his arrest in Philadelphia, Lenny had a gig in San Francisco. He performed a show not unlike countless other shows of the past few years. There were no complaining customers, no walkouts. But this time, for the first time, Lenny was busted for performing an obscene show. The following is a recording of the actual performance Lenny gave that night. It was later played during his trial.
The first gig I ever worked up here was a place called AM's 440. And I got a call, and the guy says, there's a place in San Francisco, but they've changed the policy. Well, what kind of a show is it, man? Well, Well, no, I don't know, man. It sounds kind of a weird show. Well, it's not a show. They're a bunch of suckers, that's all. That's a damn show, and that's... Oh, well, that is a pretty bizarre show. I don't know what I could do in that kind of a show. Well, now we want you to change all that. Well, that's a big gig. I can just tell him to stop doing it.
Lenny's lawyer argued to have his case thrown out on a technicality, but Lenny wanted to go to trial to prove he was innocent of obscenity. Against his attorney's advice, Lenny testified on his own behalf. Whether he helped or hurt his own case, that was anybody's guess. The verdict was headline news in San Francisco and good news for Lenny. Under the concept of equal protection, the acquittal seemed to mean that he could now perform anywhere in the United States without fear of arrest. But it didn't work out that way.
Schmuck doesn't mean schmuck anymore. No, it doesn't have it. It's lost through you. It's like goddamn you don't mean goddamn you anymore. I didn't curse you. I didn't damn you. Through usage, damn you has no. So the same with schmuck. Those people say, hey, you better say schmuck in front of a Jewish person, boy. They'll really get mad, right? Right?
When he was busted in L.A. for using the word schmuck, it became clear that someone was playing hardball.
So that is what you should think of when you think about him. You know, a lot of people have made it out to seem as if Lenny somehow was just this guy who was strung out. And, you know, he just had his comedy career, got arrested a couple times, and then just kind of petered out because of all of his usage. And that's not actually what happened. He was actually pursuing freedom of speech pretty hard, pretty tenaciously, let's say. And he was fighting for it day after day. And then when the bribery came, that's the main thing. That's what got him, like it said in the thing, it got him marked. And then they just stayed on him. It's the same type of story that we see today when somebody steps out of line. And they go as far as to name names and go to the press and say, this is what happened. Kind of whistle blew on the way things worked back then. And then they came after him harder. You know? It's wild. Wild to see. You know, so Richard Pryor, you know, he benefited from Lenny Bruce quite a bit. And he got to make it funny. But somewhere along the line, you know, Richard Pryor was super funny, but Lenny Bruce was super deep because he was at a point where, like they said in the Joe Rogan clip, that he was breaking ground, you know? A lot harder to be breaking ground than it is to be shoveling soft dirt, you know? If we think about comedy as digging itself into a hole, the hole that we're in now kind of thing. Because comedy is it's in an odd state right now. But yeah, way easier to just shovel dirt than it is to break the ground, especially when you don't have the tools because nobody's done it before. So that's what I learned there. It's very interesting. You know, Alan Watts was looked at as, you know, somebody who was just saying all these wild things. He was looked at as, you know, very wise. Lenny Bruce was wise, but what he was saying went against what was allowed. You know, Alan Watts in a way as well, but Lenny Bruce got it bad. He got it really, really bad. All because he just felt like, hey, I should be able to say these things, right? There should be no issue with me saying all this stuff, right? But apparently there was. Anyway, let's jump over to Alan Watts here. You can't see his face. I want his face in this whole thing. Let me see if I can move him around a little bit or something here. Nope, nothing. All right, well, it's a young Alan Watts. That's why you're seeing this haircut on him. This is before I don't know if he had a psychedelic past, but I have no idea, but here you go.
It isn't feeling God in that sense, as if you could do anything. But it is feeling that you and this whole world are one. And that in this experience of oneness and the sudden coming alive of everything, and the profound rightness, that's the only word I can use, the profound rightness of each moment, of this moment, however far it may seem to be short of one's ideals of perfection. This is it. And you say, having seen this, I can die content. It isn't feeling God you might think at the same time that an experience of this kind is rather dangerous. I mean, supposing one did become convinced that everything just as it is the ideal, is right. Would this mean that you could go out and murder some rich relative in order to inherit their fortune? Does it mean you can do anything you like? You can kick your father and mother, you can be cruel to your children, that you can steal and rob and anything? In a way, it does mean that. But that is only to say, isn't it, that we are free. And freedom is dangerous. But yet, freedom is one of the things which we cherish as one of our greatest possessions and privileges. But if we deny ourselves freedom, then we don't really have the power to act morally. Because all true moral acts are not the acts we are bound to do. They are the acts we are free to do. But freedom is dangerous. The moment you teach a child to walk, you can teach it to kick its mother. The moment you teach a child to use a knife to cut up its steak with, the child can go and kill someone with a knife. Life is risky. Life is not safe. And so in the same way, this experience is not safe. But on the other hand, its content is so joyous that when people are profoundly happy, they are not in the mood, usually, to go out and slug someone. And so you might say, this experience, then, which is the foundation of these great forms of Oriental philosophy, that sounds wonderful, and I'd like to get it.
So he's talking about, freedom being dangerous, and that's something that Lenny Bruce had to live. It was this dangerous freedom where he had to make these choices. And, and now I'll get to freedom and necessity, but, freedom and how dangerous it all is. But it makes you more resourceful. If you think of it in the context of, I can think for myself right now, I have a child that is just now walking, and I want to be very close so they don't bump corners and bump their head or anything, God forbid, corners, this, that. But at the same time, when they walk, I have to allow them. We don't realize because we do it all the time, but that walking is such a freedom, right? And I have to make sure that they're allowed that freedom, that they can explore that freedom. It's dangerous, but it's necessary, and that's kind of what Lenny Bruce was doing. It was very dangerous in those times to talk about things like that, to say those things, but it was necessary because, especially when we're talking about speech, you need it in order to think. And the more I have at my disposal to think, the more I'm allowed to think, the deeper in thought I can go. And we'll sort it all out. You and I, we'll think and we'll sort things out, but you have to give us that ability, Anyway, freedom and necessity. Listen to this. Alan Watts again.
You can explore the relationship of freedom and necessity. And you can see that as you can't visualize one without the other, that there could be a state in which you can see all process as simultaneously free and necessary. That's a contradiction in ordinary logic. But when we say of something that it happens necessarily, we are separating this happening from a cause. And that is a purely conceptual separation. Strictly speaking, everything that happens is part of the same event as its cause. Like I was showing you that the river is all one event. You can't say that a river is caused by its source. And if it wasn't flowing, there'd be no water in the ocean to pick up, sort of thing. And so you can get to a point where you understand that it's only, you look at your behavior, at the Tao from one point of view, and you can see it's free. That is to say, it is emerging now from the void. Quite freely, quite spontaneously. So look at it from another point of view, and you can see that everything that happens, happens necessarily. Actually, the truth is neither one nor the other. These are just different ways of classifying, ways of looking at it. It's like what you call in mathematics finding a limit. That is to say, if I have a magnet has North Pole and South Pole, and I start at the North Pole, chopping, cut off sections, approaching the South Pole. At every point that I cut off a piece, I will have a North Pole. It will still be north, all the way until I get right to the end when the whole magnet has been chopped up and it disappears. Okay, let's do the other way. I begin from the South Pole. Every time I chop, getting closer to the north, the piece left is still south. That's the idea of a limit. So in the same way, if you approach the world from the end called necessity, and you'd start chopping to get to the end called freedom, it will always be necessity if you approach it that way, and you'll see everything is happening necessarily. Then if you turn it round and begin at the end called freedom, it'll always be freedom until you get to necessity and the thing disappears.
Very interesting, you know? So again, going back to Lenny Bruce, freedom and necessity, you know? Was that freedom or was that necessity? Because talking about the North and South poles, like Alan was, if we look at it from where we are now, that was all necessity because it brought us to where we are now. And now we have that example and we know where things can go, people getting locked up for obscenity, right? But then when you're looking at it and you're on the other side of where he was as he was doing it, it just all looked like freedom. You know, it didn't actually look necessary. Like, you don't have to be doing this, Lenny. Like, you're getting locked up. Like, there's plenty of jokes you can make that don't have to do with anything that has to do with sea suckers or anything like that. Like, you don't have to do this, Lenny. And he's like, no. I have to do this. What do you mean? Like, to him, it seemed necessary. To us, it seemed, to the people back then, it looked like freedom. And it makes you question, which is why I feel like he's so wise. I know he's just a comedian, but he did help like Alan Watts helped. Because, again, we look back and that was so necessary for somebody to have done that. Because we didn't realize that there would be he didn't know there would be an internet. He didn't know there'd be social media. And it helped all of those things, you know? And it's just like it's like a relay race, you know? Because the next person was handed it, and it was Richard Pryor. And it was Howard Stern, you know? Although he's like super woke now. It was Richard Pryor and Howard Stern. And that was comedian and radio personality. And then that went further. And then he handed it, and Howard Stern handed it off to the first person that was doing stuff online that was wild. And Richard Pryor handed it to another comedian and movie star. And it just kept going. So it's like freedom and necessity. And then, you know, I invite you to think of yourself in that way. What are things that you are doing that feel necessary? Freedom versus necessity. are the things you're doing, are they freedoms or are they necessities? And does it even matter? You know, he's talking about chopping it up until you're at the point where it's almost gone. And then it seems like necessity. You know, if you do everything from the side of freedom, it all looks like freedom until that's gone. And then it becomes necessity. I don't know. It makes you think. Like right now, for me, right now, this feels like necessity. Right? There was freedom to it. At first, I started playing around with cameras and audios like 10 years ago. So it did feel like freedom at first. But even back then, it felt like necessity. But I guess I've been approaching everything from necessity because I've constantly been trying to become a provider for my family and figure that out. And I knew I wasn't somebody that could work a 9-to-5 job. And you know, I just didn't last. I just didn't have what it took. So everything's come from that place of necessity. And hopefully, you know, there's one last chop and then all of a sudden it all looks like freedom. I don't know. But yeah. Lenny Bruce, man. Lenny Bruce, he did a lot. He did a lot for everybody. I don't think we realize it. Alan Watts did a lot. Lenny Bruce did a lot. These people, you know, that's one point that I actually had written down. Those people who speak up, those people that stand up, they're so necessary. Again, back in freedom and necessity. They're so necessary because if you don't have those people, then let's say society's on a dark path already, you know? And every society is in some way. If you don't have those people who speak up and point at it, you know, and say, oh, this seems nonsensical. You know, Joe Rogan talks about the, I think it's called the Ayoka. It's this word it's like this sacred clown. I think he named one of his tours after it or something like that. It's a sacred clown. And in this society of natives, they would have this one person who's able to make fun of everything. And then if you weren't allowed to make fun of that thing, it would show you that there's an issue here. Because this is going to go down a dark path. We can't make fun of this one thing. We should be able to laugh at everything. Nothing should be off limits. But for some reason this is. So we should examine this. And, you know, that's kind of what Lenny Bruce did. And then in thought processes, you know, Alan Watts was doing the same thing. You need those people or else we just keep on. Because if one thing becomes unapproachable or unsayable or unthinkable, then another thing does, and another thing does, and another thing does. And the more speech that's cut off from you, the more thoughts are cut off from you. And the less that you can think, the less that you can actually maneuver in. And you know, that's the basis of everything, your thoughts. You need to be able to think. You need to be allowed to think, you know. It's how we make everything. You know? You know? I say that a lot when I'm trying to think out a thought. I'm not I don't have a teleprompter. I'm not Anderson Cooper, okay? But something to think about. Definitely.